I've spent over 40 years studying success, human behavior, and personal development, and I've discovered something remarkable. The difference between those who achieve extraordinary things and those who just get by isn't talent, isn't resources, isn't even opportunity, self-awareness. Let me share what I call the identity principle. You see, every morning, millions of people wake up and put on a mask. They dress like others, talk like others, think like others. They're so busy trying to fit in that they forget to stand out. This is what I call the conformity crisis. Think about this. When was the last time you asked yourself who you really are? Not your job title, not your roles, not what others expect you to be, but who you are at your core. This is what I call the essential question, and most people never ask it. I've observed something fascinating in my decades of study. Success leaves clues, and the biggest clue is authenticity. The most successful people aren't necessarily the most talented, they're the most authentic. They've done the hard work of discovering who they are. Let me tell you about what I call the mirror test. Every morning you look in the mirror, but what do you see? Do you see the real you, or do you see the person you think you're supposed to be? This is where the journey begins. You see, most people are living what I call a borrowed life. They're following someone else's blueprint, chasing someone else's dreams, living by someone else's values. And then they wonder why success feels empty, why achievement feels hollow. Consider this: every great achievement in history came from someone who understood their unique gifts and had the courage to express them. They didn't succeed by copying others, they succeeded by being authentically themselves. Let me share something powerful about what I call the authenticity advantage. When you know who you are, truly know, not just superficially, every decision becomes clearer, every choice becomes simpler, every action becomes more powerful. Here's what's fascinating about human nature. We start our lives completely authentic. Watch any child, they don't worry about fitting in or meeting expectations. They're just purely and unabashedly themselves. Then somewhere along the way, we start trading our authenticity for acceptance. Think about this. How many of your current goals are truly yours? How many of your ambitions actually came from your own heart and mind? This is what I call the origins audit, and it's crucial for authentic success. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power paradox. The more you try to be like others, the weaker you become. But the more you embrace your unique nature, your individual gifts, your authentic self, the more powerful you become. Most people are living what I call the imitation life. They're following someone else's path, pursuing someone else's dreams, living by someone else's values. And then they wonder why success feels empty, why achievement feels hollow. Consider this: every time you deny your true nature, every time you suppress your authentic self, you're not just hiding from the world, you're hiding from your own power. This is what I call self-imposed limitation. Let me share something about what I call the clarity cascade. When you begin to understand who you are, everything else falls into place. Your decisions become clearer, your actions become more purposeful, your results become more powerful. The problem with most people is they're playing a role instead of living a life. They're so busy trying to be what they think others want them to be that they never discover who they actually are. This is what I call the identity crisis of success. Think about this: how many decisions did you make today based on other people's expectations? How many times did you silence your inner voice because it didn't match what others wanted to hear? This is what I call the conformity trap. Let me tell you about what I call the authenticity equation. Your true potential isn't just about what you can do. It's about who you can become when you finally strip away all the layers of who you think you should be. Most people never experience what I call the identity breakthrough because they're too busy looking outside themselves for answers that can only be found within. They're searching everywhere except where the treasure actually lies, within themselves. Consider this: your uniqueness isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's a gift to be developed. Your peculiarities aren't weaknesses to be hidden. They're strengths to be harnessed. This is what I call the authenticity advantage. Let me share something about what I call the self-discovery sequence. First comes awareness, really seeing yourself as you are. Then comes acceptance, embracing what you see. Finally comes alignment, building your life around who you truly are. The journey to self-discovery isn't easy. It requires what I call courageous honesty, the willingness to look at yourself without flinching, to acknowledge both your strengths and your weaknesses, to face your fears and your dreams equally. Think about this: every moment you spend understanding yourself, developing your unique gifts, aligning with your authentic nature, is an investment in your future success. This is what I call the identity investment. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power pyramid. At the base is self-knowledge, understanding who you are. In the middle is self-acceptance, embracing who you are. At the top is self-expression, living who you are. Most people try to build this pyramid upside down. They're trying to express themselves before they know themselves. They're trying to accept themselves before they understand themselves. This is what I call the identity confusion. Consider this: your greatest contribution to the world isn't going to come from being a second-rate version of someone else. It's going to come from being a first-rate version of yourself. This is what I call the authenticity imperative. Let me share something about what I call the mirror moment. It's that instant when you finally look at yourself, not through society's lens, not through others' expectations, but through your own eyes. And you ask yourself, who am I really and what do I truly want? The tragedy I see every day is people trying to succeed without first understanding who they are. It's like trying to reach a destination without knowing your starting point. This is what I call the success delusion. Think about this: every moment of true fulfillment in your life came not from pretending to be someone else, but from being authentically yourself. This isn't just philosophy, this is practical wisdom for successful living. Let me tell you about what I call the authenticity dividend. When you finally align your life with who you truly are, everything becomes easier. Decision making becomes clearer. Action becomes more powerful. Success becomes more natural. Most people never experience this dividend because they're too busy trying to be who they think they should be instead of discovering who they actually are. This is what I call the identity deficit. Consider this: your unique perspective, your individual gifts, your personal experiences aren't accidents. They're ingredients. The question is, are you using them to create your own unique recipe for success, or are you still trying to follow someone else's cookbook? Let me share something about what I call the power of personal truth. When you're aligned with who you truly are, you don't have to remember how to act. You don't have to maintain a facade, you just have to be. The journey to discovering who you are isn't just about self-reflection, it's about self-revelation. It's about peeling away the layers of conditioning, expectation, and limitation to reveal your true nature. This is what I call the authenticity excavation. Think about this: how many opportunities have you missed because you were trying to be someone you're not? How many doors have remained closed because you were knocking with someone else's hand? This is what I call the identity interference. Let me tell you about what I call the authenticity acceleration. Once you start living true to who you are, success doesn't just happen, it accelerates. Because you're no longer fighting against your nature and you're flowing with it. Most people spend their lives in what I call the identity prison. They've built walls of expectations, bars of conformity, and chains of other people's dreams around themselves. And then they wonder why they feel trapped. Consider this: the energy you spend trying to be someone else could be invested in becoming more of who you truly are. This is what I call the authenticity allocation. Let me share something about what I call the personal power principle. Your greatest strength isn't in trying to be like others, it's in daring to be different. It's in embracing your unique qualities, your distinctive perspective, your individual path. The journey to self-discovery is the most important journey you'll ever take, because until you know who you are, you can't become who you're meant to be. This is what I call the identity imperative. Think about this: every great achievement, every breakthrough, every moment of excellence comes from someone being true to who they are. This isn't coincidence, it's causation. Let me tell you about what I call the authenticity advantage. When you know who you are, you don't have to waste energy pretending. All that energy can be channeled into creating, achieving, succeeding. Most people are living what I call the borrowed life syndrome. They're wearing other people's clothes, speaking other people's words, living other people's dreams. And then they wonder why success feels like a stranger. Consider this: your uniqueness isn't just a differentiator, it's your destiny. The very things that make you different are the things that make you valuable. This is what I call the identity advantage. Let me share something about what I call the personal power protocol. First, you discover who you are. Then you accept who you are. Finally, you become more of who you are. This is the path to authentic success. The greatest tragedy isn't failing to achieve success, it's achieving success as someone else. This is what I call the identity irony: working so hard to become successful that you forget to become yourself. Think about this: every decision you make either moves you closer to or further from your true self. This is what I call the authenticity alignment. Let me tell you about what I call the mirror of truth. It's not about what others see when they look at you, it's about what you see when you look at yourself. Are you seeing the real you or a carefully constructed image? Most people are living what I call the surface life. They're so focused on appearances, on fitting in, on meeting expectations that they never dive deep into who they really are. Consider this: your authenticity isn't just your greatest asset, it's your only real asset. Everything else can be copied, replicated, or stolen, but no one can be you better than you can. This is what I call the identity advantage. Let me share something about what I call the personal power paradox. The more you try to fit in, the less valuable you become. But the more you embrace your uniqueness, the more indispensable you become. The journey to self-discovery isn't just about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. It's about taking all the raw materials of your personality, your experiences, your dreams, and crafting them into something unique and valuable. Think about this. Every moment you spend trying to be someone else, a moment you could have spent becoming more of who you are. This is what I call the identity opportunity cost. Let me tell you about what I call the authenticity algorithm. Input who you truly are, process it through genuine self-acceptance, and output authentic action. This is the formula for real success. Most people are running what I call the imitation algorithm. They input what others expect, process it through fear and conformity, and output artificial action. And then they wonder why the results feel hollow. Consider this, your unique perspective isn't just a point of view, it's a power source. The way you see the world, the way you think, the way you solve problems, these aren't limitations to overcome, they're advantages to leverage. Let me share something about what I call the personal power matrix. It's the intersection of who you are, what you love, and what you're good at. This is where true success lies. The greatest achievement isn't reaching the top of someone else's mountain, it's discovering and climbing your own. This is what I call the authentic achievement. Think about this. Every time you deny your true nature, you're not just betraying yourself, you're robbing the world of your unique contribution. This is what I call the authenticity debt. Let me tell you about what I call the identity investment. Every moment you spend understanding yourself, accepting yourself, developing yourself is compound interest on your future success. Most people are making what I call the identity withdrawal. They're constantly taking from their authentic selves to pay for their artificial lives. This is a bankruptcy waiting to happen. Consider this, your quirks, your peculiarities, your unique way of seeing things aren't flaws in the system, they are the system. This is what I call the authenticity advantage. Let me share something about what I call the personal power principle. Success isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming more of who you already are. The journey to self-discovery has another fascinating dimension that I call the authenticity ripple. When you start living true to who you are, it creates waves of positive impact not just in your life, but in the lives of others around you. Let me tell you about what I call the identity magnetism. When you're authentic, you naturally attract the right opportunities, the right people, the right circumstances. You don't have to chase success. Success starts chasing you. Think about this. Every time you compromise who you are, you're not just making a single decision, you're setting a pattern. This is what I call the authenticity erosion. Most people are caught in what I call the comparison trap. They're so busy measuring themselves against others that they forget to measure themselves against their own potential. Consider this, your journey to self-discovery isn't just about finding out who you are, it's about finding out who you're not. This negative knowledge is just as valuable as the positive. This is what I call the elimination enlightenment. Let me share something about what I call the personal power projection. When you know who you are, you are. You don't have to announce it. Your authenticity speaks louder than any words could. The fascinating thing about self-discovery is that it's not a destination, it's an ongoing journey. Every day brings new insights, new understanding, new opportunities to be more authentically yourself. This is what I call the continuous revelation. Think about this, how much energy do you spend every day maintaining an image that isn't really you? This is what I call the authenticity overhead, and it's exhausting. Let me tell you about what I call the identity economics. Every bit of energy you invest in being yourself pays dividends. Every bit of energy you waste trying to be someone else is a loss. Most people are stuck in what I call the perception prison. They're so concerned about how others see them that they've lost sight of how they see themselves. Consider this your unique way of thinking, your particular perspective, your individual approach to problems isn't just different, it's valuable. This is what I call the diversity dividend. Let me share something about what I call the personal power paradox. The more you embrace your authentic self, the less you need others' approval. And ironically, the less you need others' approval, the more it tends to come. The journey of self-discovery has another dimension that most people miss. I call it the authenticity acceleration. Once you start being true to yourself, everything else starts moving faster. Your learning, your growth, your success. Think about this. Every time you say yes to being someone you're not, you're saying no to being who you really are. This is what I call the identity trade-off. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power protocol. It starts with self-awareness, moves through self-acceptance, and culminates in self-expression. Skip any of these steps and the whole process falls apart. Most people are living what I call the substitution life. They substituted others' dreams for their own, others' values for their own, others' definitions of success for their own. Consider this, your authentic self isn't just who you are, it's who you're capable of becoming. This is what I call the potential principle. Let me share something about what I call the identity investment strategy. Every moment spent understanding yourself pays compound interest in terms of future success and fulfillment. The fascinating thing about authentic living is what I call the clarity cascade. Once you start being true to yourself, everything becomes clearer. Your decisions, your relationships, your purpose. Think about this, how many opportunities have you missed not because you weren't capable, but because you weren't being authentic? This is what I call the identity interference. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power paradox. The more you try to prove yourself to others, the less powerful you become. The more you express your authentic self, the more naturally powerful you are. Most people are caught in what I call the appreciation trap. They're so busy trying to be what others will value that they never discover their own inherent value. Consider this, your unique combination of experiences, perspectives, and abilities isn't random. It's your toolkit for success. This is what I call the authenticity advantage. Let me share something about what I call the identity integration. It's the process of bringing all parts of yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, your dreams and fears, into one authentic whole. The journey to self-discovery has another dimension that I call the authenticity amplification. The more you express your true self, the stronger that self becomes. Think about this. Every time you deny your authentic self, you're not just making a choice, you're setting a precedent. This is what I call the identity erosion. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power principle. Your greatest strength isn't in trying to be perfect, it's in being perfectly yourself. Most people are living what I call the delayed life syndrome. They're waiting until they achieve certain things before they allow themselves to be who they really are. Consider this, your authentic self isn't something you need to create, it's something you need to uncover. This is what I call the revelation principle. Let me share something about what I call the identity investment. Every moment spent being true to yourself is a deposit in your success account. The fascinating thing about authentic living is what I call the alignment advantage. When your actions align with your true self, you don't need motivation, you have natural momentum. Think about this, how much of your current life is based on your own authentic choices and how much is based on meeting others' expectations. This is what I call the authenticity audit. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power pathway. It starts with self-discovery, moves through self-acceptance, and leads to self-expression. Most people are caught in what I call the perfection paralysis. They're waiting to be perfect before they allow themselves to be authentic. Consider this, your unique way of seeing the world isn't just different, it's necessary. Someone out there needs exactly your perspective. This is what I call the authenticity imperative. Let me share something about what I call the identity integration. It's not about becoming someone new, it's about becoming more fully who you already are. The journey of self-discovery has what I call the compound effect. Each step you take in being more authentic makes the next step easier and more powerful. Think about this, your authentic self isn't just who you are when no one's watching. It's who you're meant to be when everyone's watching. This is what I call the identity ideal. Let me tell you about what I call the authenticity acceleration. When you start living true to yourself, success doesn't just happen, it snowballs. Because you're no longer fighting against your nature, you're flowing with it. Think about this, every time you compromise your authenticity for acceptance, you're trading long-term fulfillment for short-term comfort. This is what I call the identity exchange rate. Most people are caught in what I call the someday syndrome. They're waiting for the perfect moment to start being themselves, not realizing that moment is always now. Consider this, your unique combination of strengths and weaknesses isn't a mistake, it's a blueprint. This is what I call the personal design principle. Let me share something about what I call the authenticity algorithm. Input self-awareness, process through self-acceptance, output authentic action. This is the formula for lasting success. The fascinating thing about self-discovery is what I call the revelation cascade. Each truth you uncover about yourself leads to deeper insights and greater understanding. Think about this. How many decisions have you made based on who you think you should be, rather than who you really are? This is what I call the identity interference pattern. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power principle. Your greatest influence doesn't come from trying to impress others, it comes from expressing your authentic self. Most people are living what I call the borrowed blueprint. They're following someone else's plan for success instead of designing their own. Consider this: your quirks and peculiarities aren't flaws to be fixed, they're features to be leveraged. This is what I call the authenticity advantage. Let me share something about what I call the identity investment strategy. Every moment spent understanding yourself pays dividends in clarity, purpose, and achievement. The journey to self-discovery has what I call the compound clarity effect. Each step of authentic living makes the next step clearer and more compelling. Think about this: your authentic self isn't just who you are, it's your greatest competitive advantage. This is what I call the differentiation principle. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power paradox. The less you try to prove your worth to others, the more valuable you become. Most people are caught in what I call the conformity cycle. They're so busy trying to fit in that they never stand out. Consider this: your unique perspective isn't just different, it's necessary. The world needs your authentic viewpoint. This is what I call the authenticity imperative. Let me share something about what I call the identity integration process. It's about bringing together all aspects of who you are into one coherent, powerful whole. The fascinating thing about authentic living is what I call the alignment advantage. When your actions match your true nature, you don't need motivation, you have momentum. Think about this: every time you deny your authentic self, you're not just hiding from others, you're hiding from success. This is what I call the identity invisibility. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power pathway. It starts with self-awareness, develops through self-acceptance, and manifests in self-expression. Most people are living what I call the surface success syndrome. They achieve external markers of success while feeling internally disconnected. Consider this: your authentic voice isn't just one voice among many. It's the only voice that can say what needs to be said in exactly your way. This is what I call the unique utterance principle. Let me share something about what I call the identity investment return. The more you invest in being yourself, the more valuable you become to others. The journey of self-discovery has what I call the revelation rhythm. It's not a straight line, but a spiral, each turn bringing deeper understanding and greater clarity. Think about this: how much of your potential remains untapped because you're trying to fit into someone else's mold? This is what I call the conformity cost. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power protocol. First, know yourself. Then accept yourself. Finally, be yourself. This is the sequence of authentic success. Most people are caught in what I call the appreciation trap. They're so busy seeking others' approval that they never develop self-approval. Consider this: your authentic self isn't just who you are when no one's watching. It's who you're meant to be when everyone's watching. This is what I call the identity ideal. Let me share something about what I call the authenticity acceleration. Once you start being true to yourself, everything else starts falling into place naturally. The fascinating thing about self-discovery is what I call the clarity cascade. Each authentic choice brings greater clarity about who you are and what you're meant to do. Think about this: every moment spent trying to be someone else is a moment lost in becoming more fully yourself. This is what I call the identity opportunity cost. Let me tell you about what I call the personal power principle. Your greatest strength isn't in trying to be like others, it's in daring to be uniquely yourself. Most people are living what I call the delayed authenticity syndrome. They're waiting for permission to be themselves, not realizing they already have it. Consider this: your unique combination of experiences, perspectives, and abilities isn't random, it's purposeful. This is what I call the design principle. Let me share something about what I call the identity investment strategy. Every authentic choice you make is a deposit in your success account. The journey to self-discovery has what I call the compound courage effect. Each brave step in being yourself makes the next step easier and more natural. Think about this: your authentic self isn't something you need to create, it's something you need to uncover and express. This is what I call the revelation principle.